Welcome to Mission Oriented, a veteran crowd podcast that showcases veterans' talent from both the private and public sectors. Their impact is everywhere, and we are here to uncover it. Today, we are joined by Tim Jensen, a Marine Corps veteran, Chief Brand Officer and co-owner at Grunt Style, and President of the Grunt Style Foundation. Here's your host, Bob Louthan.
Hey, welcome everybody. This is Bob Louthan, host of the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. Catching up today with a great American, Tim Jensen, Chief Brand Officer and co-owner, co-founder of Grunt Style. Tim, welcome to the program. Thanks for catching up with me today.
Bob, it's great to be with you. I'm excited to be here, chit chat with you, and have a couple laughs. Talk a little bit about the Grunt Style universe that we've created, and I'm excited to be with you.
I thought I'd do a little icebreaker. I've done this in the past. We used to do this thing called the lightning round, but you are a Marine. I have to be careful about the verb choice. But if you had to choose a different branch of the service, okay, what would you do? And I don't know what you call the military occupational specialty in the Marine Corps. I think it's got a different word to it, but the MOS for me in the Army. So, if you couldn't be a Marine, what would you do?
I think about that, not often, but it has crossed my mind. And I would probably say, I am one that adapts well to water. So I'd probably stay in the Department of the Navy. But I've always been, very drawn to the idea of riverines and small boat craft.
The swig.
Yeah. And I'd probably do something along those lines. I have a son now that has the opportunity to go into that route. He's in the Navy as a gunner's mate, and he's certainly enjoying it.
I've asked this question a lot of times. The most bizarre answer I got was a guy wanted to go into the Space Force and be a door gunner. So,
hey, right on. I've thought about being. There are 50, as I understand, there's like 50 to 100 Space Marines that are running around some here in the United States.
20 years ago they were making movies about those guys,
right?
Recruiting them. Well, this is so. I think you and I met a long time ago. My recollection is we met at one of the bunker labs musters in Chicago, and that's going back. We'd have to ask Todd Connor when that was. Now I have to go back and look. I'm not even sure we could figure it out. But Grunt Style was gaining traction back then. But now, I mean, your stuff is everywhere.
Yeah. It's man, it really is a blessing. It really is to see where the company has come, and especially from a fledgling idea that my business partner Daniel Alaric had come up with.
What was the idea?
Yeah, the idea was all of us that are in the military, we've been imprinted with something a little bit different than the rest of our counterparts here in the United States, right? We went through some training, that less than 1% of the population has had. We have been instilled with values and character that you don't normally get unless you're in some sort of private setting or very organized type of situation. So I think that right there kind of sets things apart, right? And when you leave the military, you're leaving a bit of like your culture, your thing, that fold. So the idea was, how do you take those values and those characteristics with you outside of the military? And no better way of doing that than expressing those ideas and characters and sayings through T-shirts. So that's how the company came to really be. I don't really consider myself too much of a founder. I know people say that, and I've been with the company for many years. It's going on, I'll be 13 years coming here soon. The oldest employee in the company. But I see myself more as a co-owner, right? I came in 2013. There was only 5 of us. I was a T-shirt folder at that time, the lowest role in the business. And And I guess that was that Marine mentality of like, I see something, I see an opportunity in front of me, and I'm going to assault the objective until I achieve my victory.
What
And
hold on a second. What's your Marine story? So how did you got to tell everybody whether you're a Hollywood or Paris Island,
sure.
good stuff.
Yeah, well, it's a long, it all part of this big story, right? So,
Yeah.
I consider myself a Paris Island Marine. I joined the Marine Corps in 1997 in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that I came from a broken home. My parents got divorced when I was very young, and my mom was doing her best to keep us her three kids focused on the important things like school and stuff like that. So we chasing jobs and all sorts of different things. And um, I had some really great exposures in my youth from my grandfather's experiences in World War II. I found a metal box of his, in the crawl space of their house one time, and my curiosity got the best of me. And, I started researching what
Was
all
he a
these groups
Marine
and metals were.
also, or?
No, he was actually part of the Army Air Corps, which, for those out there that understand history of military in the United States, it was the beginnings of the Air Force, right before the 1947 National Security Act. He fought in World War II, part of the Army Air Corps, and saw some time over in the theater. And I got to experience that the hard way of asking questions, and
Yeah.
my grandfather saying, "I don't want to talk about it. Get away from me, you kid, you kid," and all that stuff. But it really left an impression on me. Then my mother's left an impression on me when I told her I wanted to join the Marine Corps. She took me to the Vietnam War Memorial in D.C. First time I saw my mother really cry. I like to say, for reasons other than my influences. Um, and that left another, lasting impression on me. Like, she copied men's name down from her high school that never made it home, right? That got drafted. So, it put me on a path, to really solidify that. Joined the Marine Corps in 97. Like I said, my first MOS was Amtracker. Got out in 2001. Not really anything of notoriety. Garrison Marines, for all those that know, sucks real bad. So it was a lot of drinking and shenanigans and just getting in trouble. But I think that's all part of the experience. And I got out, went back to Chicago. September 11th happened, and I was trying to find my way back into the Marine Corps. Ended up in an I&I station in northern Chicago. Then transferred into the reserve unit that they were the I&I inspectors of.
You got it. Then you got activated.
And
Yeah.
then we got activated, and
Yeah.
next thing you know, I'm in the Triangle of Death, Iraq, 2004, 2005, fighting in the worst possible area in the entire country. And we had, really kicked the hornet's nest there, and we're doing some
Mostly
really
Marine
good work.
Reserve units that were on the tip of the spear, as
Yeah, we were,
my
a little
stuff.
story there. Like, our unit was, the first Marine Reserve Battalion since Vietnam to be given their own area of operation, meaning that we were not supported or operating with a sister unit or a commanding unit outside of the 24th MEU that was operating out of Kalsu, which is about 30 clicks, to the southeast of us. So we made some history, but the unit I was a part of was a very historical unit to begin with. 2nd Battalion, 24th Marines. I was in weapons company, but they date back to the landing at Iwo Jima and many of the Pacific landings. There was a Medal of Honor commander that came out of that beach landing. So that's why that unit still exists today, is because of the history that came along with it. But from there.
Fascinating stuff. I got a question back on your grandfather. Was when he was flying in the Air Force, was he the Army Air Corps rather, was he in Europe or was he over Japan?
He was in the European theater. He's there. We got a couple of photos. There's not many photos of him that have survived, but some of the photos that we do have of him is working with civil. I guess it would be like the cap of modern day, the civil air, or not civil air, but combat action. Or it's really confusing to me, but it was like all civilian based. After Market Garden, he was on he was on a plane, flew in some of those missions, and then there was a lot of civilian reconstruction efforts.
Right.
So there through the end of the war, and then the reconstruction of the period. So
We
really
could spend a
fascinating stuff.
whole lot of time talking about shared experience because my father was in Europe also as an artillery officer, and strangely he did not talk about his experiences with us very much either until Saving Private Ryan came.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was kind of like a cathartic thing for all of them. But
yeah.
anyway, well,
Yeah, I had a big family, eight aunts and uncles, 30 cousins, and
oh man,
nobody knew that my grandfather was in the war until, I had found that metal box
yeah.
and kind of exposed it. It was kind of fascinating.
All right, so you got in the Marine Corps from Raleigh. Are you a North Carolinian? But then you said you went back to Chicago. So,
Yeah, yeah. So part of it is, having the opportunity of living in many places due to my mother's line of work. Uh,
oh,
I was born in Chicago, moved to Iowa, or I'm sorry, moved to Kansas, lived in Topeka for a period of time. Then I was in Iowa, North Carolina, California, been in some unique places. But North Carolina, I like to call a home because a lot of my formative years were there. My high school time, I graduated high school there. Um, but I think Chicago will always be considered like my home. It's like a vortex. If you're from Chicago, you might be able to escape for a period of time, but it always calls you back. So I've been in and out of Chicago like three times,
that's cool.
maybe more than that.
So, all right, let's talk brand for a second because I think you have an iconic brand. All right, Grunt Style. You got the cross muskets. This will defend. Uh, how did that did that come together before you got there, or was that did that happen since? That
Yeah, I mean, so
that
that
brand
probably
is
goes.
it's on everybody's left shoulder, man.
Yeah,
You told me some enormous number of t-shirts that are out there. Did you tell me 70 million units?
over 70 million units. Yeah, yeah,
That's incredible.
yeah. It's more than a third of the population of the country, right? Um, I think what's really interesting about the brand um, is that when we were first coming on the scene, we were speaking to a very specific audience, right? That was a 25 to 35-year-old male, probably had a combat deployment, was probably a non-commissioned officer, led men and women into combat, um, and was a leader of some sort, right?
All right.
And those people were eating the product up in the very early days. Why? Because at the only time there wasn't really many brands out there that were serving the veteran
Those are
space.
kind of edgy.
Yeah, especially,
I mean,
right?
we have a little bit of a gallows sense of humor that is
Yeah.
not pervasive, but
That's right, right.
yeah,
So Ranger Up was probably the brand that really rose to the top during that time period, right? And that was a very niche brand, great brand, but niche to the Ranger community. So it didn't really, not everybody could wear that stuff. So it was very, and then you had 762 and maybe Devil Dog, Sergeant Grit, right? Those were really the big brands of the time, and two of the three of those were extraordinarily cringy. When you walk into the PX, you're like, oh, again, I can't, I'm not going to wear that stuff. Like, my son is a Marine. Like, nobody wants to see
yeah,
that crap,
yeah.
right? So when we came in and Dan was really, driving in some of those, provocative designs that were capturing the GWAT mentality, it delineated us from everything that was in the market. And, those GWAT people started really grabbing into us and adopting us. And as, society goes, when you get, military to adopt something, it's going to go zeitgeist because where the military culture goes, fashion goes and pop culture goes. You can look throughout the United States history, and that's generally how that happens, right? There's a lot of connections that are tied to that. So we exploded, and then more people started coming to the brand, to the point now, like there's memes that exist, and we play into it and we laugh at it ourselves. That the quintessential brovet, or the
Yeah.
loadout of the standard operating clothing loadout
What
of
is the baby boomer Cold War era guy? What's that? Are we a niche market for you, or are we just like a total loss?
Well, you guys are there, right? The
Yeah.
Vietnam, the Cold War market still is participating, and they're buying into the
There were a
patriot.
lot more of us,
Yeah,
oddly enough.
and
So
they're very patriotic, right? So and I'm seeing that with my work with the VFW, right? You've got that older community of warfighters that have been really holding the VFW together through the ceremonies, and the customs and courtesies that come with the VFW. They've been doing a great job of holding that together. But that generation is going away, right? They're much like the World War II generation. There's not many left, and those that are, they're not as mobile as they used to be. They're not as sharp as they used to be, and we need to be honoring them for their contributions to this country, as much as the next generation before them. So it's kind of where we find ourselves is, we're a brand now that is beyond the serving just the military culture and the veteran themselves. We're a brand that is serving to this higher sense of pride in self, pride in military, pride in country. And I think that's pretty great that there's a brand that exists like ours in a time where patriotism is not necessarily the coolest thing in town. There's a lot of controversy that's happening in this country right now, and patriotism and the love of our flag, is front and center. And I think there is a conversation that we can be had, and Grunt Style can be a part of this, or even lead this conversation of bringing the idea of patriotism back to the conversation of at the dinner table, and saying, why is it important to have pride in our country? We don't have to love our government, right? Our government is shit, excuse my language, but our country is something that we can all have pride in, because our country will withstand the 4 years of any certain people legislative body that is elected, and that's what we need to preserve for the next generation of Americans, is this incredible country that has been gifted to us.
there's fewer and fewer of us that kind of took the oath to, that's a big deal. So, um, uh, going back to Grunt Style, I mean, when did Tim discover that you were a brand guy? I mean, and how did being, sort of a knuckle dragging Marine help you be the right brand? Well, I can see why it did for
Yeah, right.
this,
That's
for
gonna be
this
easy. That's a
brand,
layup.
right? But I mean, when did you kind of have that epiphany that you were the brand guy, or how did that happen?
Well, that was, I never expected it. And I never expected any of this, to tell you the truth, Bob. Like, before I was doing
Guy
any of this,
trying to do something else, and
yeah, I was a union carpenter, man. Like,
oh
I
yeah,
left the Marine Corps, left the combat, all that stuff, went to be a carpenter. Um, but I knew I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I was making great money, six figures doing that, but it wasn't everything. And I was having some, personal struggles during that time period. But I always felt creative, right? I had a couple businesses that I started in between, my time leaving the Marine Corps and then joining Grunt Style. I went to college. I got a degree in game design, game theory, and creating video games. Um, and so I've always been like a creator, but I've never really thought I was like a brand person.
yeah.
And when I came into Grunt Style, folding t-shirts and just trying to help build a business, I didn't think of myself as a brand guy. I was like learning as I was going. Like when I came into the business, like knowing what a cog was, a cost of goods, it would have bounced off my forehead like a basket,
Yeah, I know.
right? But now here I am 13 years later, and like I can tell you
Second
how to
nature.
drive contribution margins that have impacts in your COGS that drive into the bottom line of your business and your overall cash flow and how it's to be positioned. I am now an expert in all those things because I was forced to learn all of that.
What's better? You guys are both, in stores and online. I mean, what are the pros and cons for you for one versus the other?
I think when we first came into the scene, it was e-commerce only, right?
Mhm.
That was we were one of the leading innovators in building online presence, online branding. Um, I would say that COVID was a extraordinarily unique time for businesses.
Yeah.
And for us, we used that time to explore and to innovate. And had it not been for that, I don't think our company would have really survived COVID. We might have made it through, but I don't think we would have survived it. Um,
Are there other vets in the leadership team? And do you think that experience helped you get through the rough parts of COVID?
No, there are other vets within the organization and leadership. I think what got us through COVID was becoming an omni-channel brand and understanding that the consumer was engaging with brands at that time period in much different ways than what we have traditionally understood over 20, 30, 40, 50 years of commerce, right? So we pivoted very quickly to be where the customer was during that time period, and it
Home.
like was paid in dividends, right?
Yeah.
And then going back to like the brand question of how did I understand I was a brand person? It was really like around 2017 that like I started doing more brand stuff, right? I was a chief operating officer, and I really did a lot of the commercials because I'd done commercial work, most of my life. Again, going back to what my mother, line of work was, it exposed me to television commercials, and I did stuff for, early Hardee's, early, bank commercials, early J.C. Penney's. I was doing like TV commercials for that, so that was very easy for me to do. It wasn't until I became the chief strategy officer that I was like, brand. Okay. I'm a strategist. I've always been a strategist my entire life. All of my bona fides speak to that, from my time in the Marine Corps and developing strategy to, all the other things in between. Some things I was great at, some things I was not so great at. But it was around that time period I became to really understand that if I was to apply all the things I learned in the Marine Corps, which is the cult of personality, right? And you take that branding that the Marine Corps has instilled into us at the very early days of the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor, you put the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor on everything, right? That's how branding is, right? And then I read a bunch of books that really solidified those ideas, and helped me really round out a complete thought on how to approach that. And since then, it's been it's paid off very well for me. I still don't consider myself a marketer. I consider myself a brand person, and I think brand transcends all things, because in these types of businesses that exist, brand is everything, and that's what people are buying into. They're not buying the product. The product is a residual of the brand. It is an expression of the brand. Right now we have over 12 million people that think that we're a pretty cool brand.
And if is there like one sentence that describes the grunt style ethos?
This will defend.
This will defend. Okay, well, that's
Right.
right
And
on.
it's crazy. Like, but it's not crazy. It's hard for me to say because I'm a Marine. I'm like, this will defend. That's some Army horse crap, blah, 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 blah. But even the assaulting flag, when I came into the business, I didn't know what the assaulting flag was. The Marines don't recognize that stuff. And I was like, man, this is very weird for me. But over the years, it's really just grabbing hold. It's grabbed hold of me. It's grabbed hold of our consumers, the American public at large, and all of the copycats. I mean, you can't be a patriotic brand today without copying the grunt style innovative sleeve applications.
Yeah.
Period. There's so many knockoffs, nine line, all of them. They all exist that way. And that's okay. Like, there's the
Every Coke
imitators and
needs a
there's the followers.
Pepsi, right? I mean, it's like that's good. Hey, I want to cover two other things, and so you've written a couple of books on Amazon, and I haven't gotten them into it, but let's talk the book of Bang Bang, and then you got a book of violent bedtime stories. So,
Yeah, yeah.
can you share with everybody? Let's just be shameless promoters here for a second, and talk about the two books and why you wrote them.
Yes, absolutely. And I don't think this is necessarily shameless plugging, since none of the books that I have ever written are about me, right?
Yeah,
The one thing that I enjoy about the work that I do is I get to tell some fantastic stories. Fantastic stories, I mean, in the sense that of, some of the greatest Americans that have ever had the privilege of wearing a uniform of this country have done some incredible things, and their stories are often never told. I've spent a lot of time going through and reading Silver Star citations, Medal of Honor citations of men like Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez, probably the greatest story of valor and selflessness that I've ever read. And that was the very first book that I wrote. It was the very first story that we told on Violent but True Bedtime Stories. And it exemplifies, the American spirit, that American warrior spirit. So that's what the Violent but True Bedtime Stories, really came out to be. It started out as a content piece, video content, that we were doing on Facebook, and I was like, we should put this into story form. So right now there's 4 books you can find on gruntstyle.com that, or even on Amazon that tell these stories. There's 12 books that will be told in total. So I have a few more, 8 more to write, and the next one will be coming out in about a month or so. So keep your eyes open for that. And then there's the Book of Bang Bang, right? As we do work with the Grunt Style Foundation, which is really focused on healing veterans from toxic exposure that related to burn pits and their deployment overseas in Afghanistan and Iraq. To suicide, the suicide epidemic that's happening in our country.
I mean,
That's pervasive.
I lost a classmate and colleague of mine to suicide a week ago Saturday.
Yeah,
In,
I'm sorry to hear
in
that. It
my
is too
advanced stage
close.
of life, yeah.
The suicide epidemic is something that we all need to be putting our attention towards. Like I understand, we put sometimes we put our focuses into the wrong things, and that is through influences and other stuff. But today we have a monumental epidemic that is in front of us. That is we're largely coming out of overprescribing at the VA. The level of our colleagues, our brothers and our sisters that are dead from their own hand due to these poisons is out of control. So, with
And
all
this
that,
was stunning to me. I mean, and there was just no indication whatsoever that this particular individual was headed in that direction.
yeah,
And
yeah, and that's often what we're hearing with, especially with these overprescribing of psychotropics. So, with all that work, what we're finding is that, our community of war fighters, the ones that went and fought the war, the longest war in American history, have lost their way, have forgotten that pride that they had in uniform and the work that they were doing. And that's what the Book of Bang Bang, really touches on is, calling to the spirits of our Vietnam brothers that had paved the way in front of us and had went into the jungles of a foreign land to fight the communists, the elusive communists, to the trials of the GWOT veteran that went into the deserts of the Middle East to fight the elusive terrorists. They were much the same of the enemy of our country. And that book is really telling of the endurement of the American warfighter in that period and this period, and how we've come together in sorts through those shared experiences, and moving a new way forward, and not to forget who we are as fighters and members of our community that have been invested. Millions of dollars have been invested into us by the United States government to be leaders. It's time for us to be leaders in the civilian world, and that's what the Book of Bang Bang is about. And you can find all those on Amazon. The Book of Bang Bang was 9 weeks in the top 100 of its bestseller of its class on Amazon. So, really great book. There's some good some reviews on it. So I encourage anybody that's listening, if you're wanting to find
I'll put some
some
links in the show
parables.
notes so that folks can, find you and find that. Let's go into the Grunt Style Foundation just a little bit more.
Mhm.
How did that start? What are you doing and where are you going with it? You're the president of the foundation. What was the vision, but more importantly, where are you going with it?
Yeah, the vision was to create an organization that was not like the big six, like Wounded Warrior, VFW, all those guys, right? To create this organization that was addressing the specific needs of the GWAT era individual and the veterans at large. We were doing a lot of work with the PACT Act at that time, which was the largest piece of legislation in veterans history that we brought across the finish line, and we started organizing and really putting some great people together through the idea of this foundation to help veterans through suicide prevention, through toxic exposure therapies, alternative modalities to mental health. We've been a leading member of the veteran community driving that conversation around psychedelics and cannabis. Um, and other and veteran homelessness, right? Uh, Food insecurities, not so much it's still a challenge, but over the years of that we've been putting our attention to it, we put over 100 tons of food into active duty military members' hands. Like that's absurd that we have to do that.
Active
So
duty.
say again.
Active duty.
Active duty. Active duty. There's a great RAND study that we were working off of that identified food insecurities in the military, especially,
How does that happen, man? Man, I had BAS, BAQ. Man, I bought a car with my food money, I think, when I was,
yeah. Well, imagine being a
how does that
young
happen?
NCO, right?
Huh?
That you're in the Army, you're
I
full
could get in trouble
you.
for saying I bought a car with my food money, by the way, because I
Yeah,
mean,
I bet. Oh, the sticklers. But
well,
imagine
somebody's
that
going to come
young.
back and get me 45 years later.
Right? Imagine that young soldier. He married his high school sweetheart. They have a baby, right? He's at Fort Bellevue and he's doing his thing. And then he gets, his wife, is finally back to work. Their child's in daycare services, and then he gets orders to Fort Lewis, nowhere, right? And he has to go to Fort Lewis, pick up his family, move them out. His wife has to quit the job that she just got. It was probably her
The
dream job.
unemployment and underemployment for
That's
military
it.
spouses
And that's how these families are getting
is almost
devastated,
criminal, right?
right? So, that's what we've been seeing. So, we organized our Forward Foundation to really address these issues. And we've done an incredible job over the, 3 years that we've been doing it. Again, I'll say that, we've only been operating for 3 years and we're operating like we've been around for 10 to 15. And why that is because we hired the right people to build this thing and to address the issues that are right in front of us. And not only did we hire the right people, these are people that, understand the mission, they understand the risks, and they're saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
My numbers are going to be wrong and they're going to be dated, but I think unemployment among military spouses is 25%, something of that nature, and it's absolutely because the employer knows that she or he is going to pick up and move in
Yes.
24 months, and they'd rather pick up somebody else that you know, and so not only the dirty hidden secret is that they're underemployed, right? So if they've got them, they might have advanced degrees, but they can't get a job
Yeah.
in their field because of exactly the same problem. So um, it's sad that we have to address these kinds of issues and have veteran service organizations, if you will, like your foundation, that has to address these things. Are you finding that I mean, there are a few more veterans getting elected to Congress now, particularly of your era? Is that helping, or have we still got a ways to go on that?
I think we got a ways to go. Listen, like there are some good ones up there, and then there's some bad ones up there, right? I have not seen any, good legislation that is addressing the needs of our community,
Yeah.
that is of any value. It seems like a lot of these guys go up there and they get sucked up by the machine, and the next thing you know, they're not doing anything for the people, which is, very sad because these are men and women of character that I would never expect to bend to such influences, but it happens.
Yeah,
You know,
you got all these government programs that it's the law of unintended consequences. I mean, I look at a lot of the stuff in the VA, and I call it the military disability complex because you got so many people that are getting sucked into that industry, and there's an industry that's built around getting 100% disability, and
my God, yes,
and
exactly. Like I'm con
and
I've
that's wasted dollars, I think.
I've been to combat, I've been blown up several times. Like I have my own issues, right? I have my own disability ratings, right? And I am talking to people around me that have 100% disability ratings that, haven't, didn't leave Al Assad. And that was the closest they got to combat. And I'm listening to their stories. I'm like, guys, like this is like that's fraud.
But it's a trap
It's
too. I think
fraud.
I think they get drawn into this trap, and well, that
Yeah.
would be a
Like,
whole
oh yeah, let's
podcast
get the
episode.
100%. You deserve it. Well, it's not that you don't deserve it, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what anybody's saying. But when I hear stories of some of the people that are getting 100% and some of those things, like that's fraud, man.
How do you feel as a GWAT veteran that society views you today now that we kind of had an ignominious withdrawal from Afghanistan and all that? I sort of feel, I mean, do you feel like the pendulum swinging? I'm curious about that.
I don't know. I think that I make this analogy a lot, right? We're living in that weird time after the longest war in American history. And if you're a fan of Star Wars, right? Um, you know, when the Clone Wars were over, the Clone Wars were tossed aside, and they were found in the dredges of society, often on the streets, homeless and addicted to drugs. Why? Because their usefulness was over, and they've been thrown to the side like uh, old equipment, old war
Yeah,
equipment.
we need our
Right?
call, we need our mission, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we are today. We've done a great job in our society of recognizing veterans and saying, "Hey, thank you for your service," right? Because we didn't want to do what our parents did and spit on veterans and spit on our neighbors, right? But we've gotten to the point now where we say, "Thank you for your service," as I step over your homeless ass sleeping on the side of the street, and
Yeah.
that is not any better.
I sometimes coach people to thank them for their sacrifice, and also realize that their family, their wives or children or husbands in some cases, were serving too. And
Yeah.
you
There's
got you got a
I'll put it this way, considering the sheer amount of people that participated in the GWAT theater and campaigns, I would be pressed to say that there are not many, if at all, those that exist that have not experienced the death that has surrounded that conflict, meaning through cancer, the loss of family, friends, and loved ones through cancer, suicide, or anything else attached to this conflict, because it is far vast and reaching. And I think if we want to do anything for the veterans of the GWAT period, it's why don't you just ask them how they're doing? Ask them how their health is.
yeah,
That would be a great start. And
yeah.
that's what they're really looking for, is just to be acknowledged and saying, man, like we're dying here, and it's all the things that we were exposed to, and we're being overexposed to through these psychotropic medicines. Why don't you just ask a veteran of the GWAT period how they're doing? That might just change their day.
I'm gonna stop right there on that. I think that's a great way to conclude our discussion. You've been listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. My guest has been Tim Jensen with Grunt Style. Hey, how do you like folks to reach out and get in touch with you? And we'll make sure we give them a link to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in the company or the foundation, you go to gruntstyle.com or gruntstylefoundation.org. If you're looking to talk to me personally, you can reach out to my social media. You can find me on all the big channels. And I do answer all of my own messages, so you're going to get the real deal.
Tim, it's been great catching up with you. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. And just really appreciate hearing the story. I hope I'll get you back soon. This has been good. And we're going to continue to follow. Hey, you've been listening to the Mission Oriented podcast on the Veteran Crowd Network. I want to throw out an Army Bravo Zulu to my Marine brother over here, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Mission Oriented. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and you won't miss an episode. To learn more about Mission Oriented and the Veteran Crowd Network, visit us at veterancrowdnetwork.com. And if you're part of the military community and tired of the hassles that come with military discounts, it's time to check out Veteran Crowd Rewards. Isn't it time someone figured out a hassle-free military discounts? With Veteran Crowd Rewards, it all starts with a simple, one-time sign-up. Just use your existing Visa card. No extra apps needed, no repeated logins. From there, the experience couldn't be easier. Just set it up once and get rewarded seamlessly forever. Use your card as you normally would. Every time you swipe, tap, or click, our system recognizes your purchase automatically. Rewards and cash back are delivered seamlessly, right back to you, without any extra steps at checkout. Just instant recognition of your service and real savings in return. And the best part? Our merchant network is constantly growing. That means more places to shop, more savings, and more ways to feel appreciated. For veterans, active duty personnel, reservists, and families, it's saving made simple. Because honoring your service should be effortless. Sign up today at veterancrowd.com and get rewarded the way you should have been all along.